It's been a while since I've asked, but if you like my content, maybe hit like or subscribe or leave a comment. About 3 or 4 days ago, I went up to the beach alone and decided I was going to fly. And when I go to the beach and fly alone, I'm a little bit more cautious than I would be if there's a group of guys there. I just find that, this is a pretty remote section of beach, and if you have a problem here, you're going to have to self-rescue. If you get in the water, you're going to have to be able to get out of your gear on your own. You're going to have to be able to swim back to shore on your own. It's not really the most comfortable place or position to put yourself in. But having said that, it's not over-the-top dangerous. It's just there's specific concerns for beach flying that probably need to be discussed. The week prior to this flight, I went down in the other direction in Florida and got together with a group of guys that included some of the people from the Aviator PPG crowd. They brought their film crews, and they're working on a video of that experience. It'll probably be out in a week or so. And Mr. Farewell and I had discussed maybe putting together a collaborative effort to talk about the specific unique challenges to beach flying and some strategies to mitigate the risks. Anyhow, back to my story. So when I arrived at the parking area, I thought, you know what? The winds are fairly light. I'm going to fly my big paragliding only Eden 7 glider. This is a 30-meter glider, and I'm pretty light on it. I'm about 50% between the low range and the high range of weight. And it looked like it was such a nice, smooth, calm day. I was just going to take that. There's no trimmers on the glider. It's speed bar only. And I thought I'll be fine. And I'll just make the launch work and make the landing work, and I'll just have to watch that I don't get into wind conditions that start picking up. If they do, I'll land. So here we go. I get the glider out. I'm about to start warming up the motor here, and for frame of reference, it's mid-tide. Low tide was a few hours prior to this. The tide is coming up the beach, and that weed line is probably going to be pretty close to where the tide is going to be in an hour and a half, well, maybe 2.5 hours. So I got about an hour to get out and go fly and get back on the beach before it's fully high tide and there's no beach to land on. Well, the problem was that when I got out of the truck and started heading down here to the beach, there was hardly any wind at all, and by the time I got all my gear carried out to the beach and set up, the winds had started to pick up pretty good. So I had a plan. I was too lazy to walk all the way back to the truck and get my other glider, but I just kite this glider from its current position up to the top of the dunes, run straight into the wind, and make a slight right turn. The winds were favoring a south departure for the best runway. So I get the motor all warmed up, I come over here and I clip into the glider. I didn't lay the glider out because when you do so on the sand, if the wind picks up, sand drifts into the glider, or it drifts onto the bottom of the glider. And when you pull the glider up, the wind that blows up the face of the glider will carry a big load of sand into the cell openings. And I've had some gliders fill up with sand so much that the sand works down to the trailing edge of the wingtips, and it can actually make the glider uncontrollable. And if you got airborne with that situation, wingtips full of sand, you'd be in a world of hurt. So I tend to do this, and then once I get that leading edge inflated like that, I never set it back down if I can at all help from doing so, because that's where the sand gets introduced into the glider. So I got everything ready. I did a little bit of a wall building here. My plan right now is to inflate the glider and take about 10 steps back up the dunes. There's quite a bit of grade differential here between the water and the top of the dunes. And the significance of that is that the wind accelerates with the Venturi effect as it gets compressed going over the top of the dunes. You'll see that wind indicator is only about 4 foot tall. Okay, perfect. Let's start the motor and go. Well, I noticed that any tension on the lines was keeping the tips flying. So it's a fine balance here. I didn't want to get the glider itself up into the vegetation because this is some of the clingiest plant material on the planet. It'll stick your lines together and cause you to blow a launch or fly around for the whole hour that you're flying with a bunch of trash in your lines. And a mistake that I've made in the past here is slackening the lines by taking a step toward the glider, thinking it'll stay on the ground, and all it does is roll up the dunes and get just entangled in all that vegetation. So here comes the motor. Motor's running now. I give a little bit of a warm up. I'd already warmed it up previously. I take a look around behind me. There's nobody back behind me. Get my brake toggles in my hand and I say, okay, I'm going to wait for my cycle, take a look. Here we'll start bringing the glider up. And as the glider comes up, I'm struggling. For some reason now the wind has shifted and it's more onshore than it had been when I initially inflated the glider. All right, let's set it down here. I'll take another step over to the right. We'll try it again. And I think I'm about ready to rock and roll here. And doesn't it figure about the time I inflate it for the second time, the winds have shifted and they're back straight out of the south now. Well, the glider takes a pronounced right turn, and I know better than to chase it. I've got full left braking here trying to bring it back overhead. I can't slacken the glider, it'll collapse on top of the dunes. And I'm able to fly it up back overhead by grabbing the A's. A little bit of back pressure, a little bit of tension, it comes overhead, and I'm ready to go, but my motor dies right here. Well, now I'm fighting to put the glider back on the ground. And the winds are, I really don't want to let it hit leading edge first. It will fill up with sand then. So I'm trying to kite it back down. And it's all I can do. The winds have really picked up, and I'm now clipped into a glider that's too big. I sea line, stall it back onto the beach. And a sigh of frustration. Well, between the hot temperatures and the physical activity, this really, really wore me to the point I needed to breathe heavy for a few seconds here and collect my thoughts. Now I'm really questioning if I should go back to the truck and get the smaller glider. Nah, I decided it's too much work. I'm going to give it one more shot. So, I don't know why the motor quit. Yes, I do. The idle's too low. I restart the motor, get a little better run up this time. And I got to get a clean inflation and hit it, get in the air. And the cumulus clouds are building pretty big back off to the west. So this is going to be a pretty short flight, less than an hour now. So, by the way, all I did was tension the glider a little bit. I hardly even lifted the A's. There it comes up overhead. Now the winds are more steady and it's a little bit more down the beach. And all it took was 2 steps to get off. Anyhow, that was my thought process, and I hope to work on that collaborative with Eric or some of his film crew. I've written a small curriculum for flying gliders at the beach. You know, everything from how to get permission and make sure you're not pestering the beachgoers to how to get safely up and down the beach, not hurt anybody, not damage any vegetation, and retain our privilege of flying paramotors on some of the beaches around the country.